I like to break suffering into a category or two.
All right.
As a human, there is suffering, period.
Right.
Can't escape it. However, there is a thing called unnecessary suffering. It's where you're suffering more than you necessarily have to.
You're putting yourself through, I think that's what you call abuse.
Yeah, it's self-abuse.
Yeah.
It's self-damnation. It's self-sabotaging.
That is a great point, man.
Yeah, and at the hands sometimes another person, right? People can be in abusive relationships or, there's societies today that are living under dictatorships, right?
Yeah.
That's unnecessary suffering.
Life is a struggle in itself.
Right. So suffering is, to me, it's kind of broken into two categories. And when we see unnecessary suffering, as someone who has experienced freedom from unnecessary suffering, we have a duty. You and I would say we had a duty
Absolutely.
to go and alleviate the unnecessary suffering, right?
To give some assistance to that, to stop and try our best to.
But then you start bitching about the rest of your stuff, and it's like, dude, sorry, bro, but there's a certain level of pain you're just gonna have as a human, right? But
that's very real talk. That's very real, man. Yeah.
All this extra shit, though, you don't got to go through that.
Yeah.
And that's the thing why we're doing what we're doing tonight, right? We're trying to alleviate this unnecessary suffering in the world and community that we know and understand and know that we can be helpful in, right?
Right.
I don't know what to do or how to be helpful in, these other areas.
Right.
But what do I know? And let me be helpful there.
Yeah, it just brings it. You saying that, the thing that popped into my head is, dealing with somebody that you assist in getting into a detox, right? They leave maybe being a vicious heroin addict, right? All jacked up, scarred up. Got nothing. Who knows what they did to get the drugs, okay?
Right.
And they get into detox. And they're grateful. They go through that suffering to get them out of the detox, to be clean.
Yeah.
And then they get into, like a safe environment where they can focus on their sobriety, right? And that moment of time, once reality hits them in that moment, they're like, man, they're trying to rob me out of they charged me $275 a week. You know what I mean? So it's like, what happened to you, so much of that was unnecessary.
Yeah.
So we step in and help.
Right.
Then you get you to where you're actually facing life on life things, and they're like, oh, I think they're trying to get me. I'll just check it's like $250 or something. Right. I'm in arrears.
Right.
I'm like, bro, that's life. That's
15 days ago.
That's regular suffering.
Yes.
Bro. Yeah. And now you're about to leave?
Right.
For what?
Yeah.
You know what you looked like 2 weeks ago? So, it's a real to me, that's how I'm viewing what you're saying, like the unnecessary suffering and suffering, man, which is a part of life.
Right. And what causes unnecessary suffering, I would say there are some external factors, right? There might be family of origin stuff, right? There might be growing up in an alcoholic home or in an abusive environment or in an environment where, there's drugs and loose living kind of thing, right? And so it's easy and you kind of fall victim to that, right?
Yeah.
And then, you kind of pick up patterns and behaviors based on your environment.
Right.
And maybe you even internally, you start to believe things like, I'm not shit, I won't ever be anything. My dad wasn't anything, mom wasn't anything, I'm not going to be anything.
Right.
And so then the story starts playing, and then you start believing that story as reality, as true, and now you're living based on this thing that doesn't even exist. It's just you made it up in your head.
Right.
And now you're 10, 20 years, 30 years down the line and then someone shows up and says, oh, you don't have to live that way.
Yeah.
No, that's a story you've been telling yourself.
Right.
I used to live like you. That's the powerful. I used to be like that.
That's just like what you said. I have to give them, I got to relate to them and what I've been through.
Right.
And that's like the value of, I think that's like the value of, the see, it kind of like swings me back around to this whole thing because, if you didn't experience the things that I guess it would be like unnecessary suffering. If you didn't go through that and pull yourself out of that unnecessary darkness, the lies that were told to you, or how you were influenced in negative aspects of your life. What made you think that way? What makes you, how can you relate to this dude is going through such a rough time, right? But the necessity of that is saving another. That's how it's necessary. Like what you've been through is actually saving somebody's life now.
Yes. Now that's the thing. Let me just say, and then you brought this up, and this is the thing. Like I don't know a lot about God.
Yeah.
But I do know that God doesn't waste pain.
Oh.
I know that.
I love
that. I know when it comes to human pain, God never wastes your pain, and God never lets you suffer alone. You may not acknowledge it, you may not see it, but God is always with us in the pain, and God always redeems our suffering if we surrender to it.
Amen.
That's the thing about a life with a higher power, God.
Listen,
Christ.
people, are you listening? Are you listening?
And dude, I mean, this is why the Jesus story is still relevant to me, is because that shows up in the Jesus story.
Yeah.
If pass this cup, if I ain't got to take this cup, sweating in the Garden of Gethsemane, sweating blood. Look, I ain't got to take it. If there's another way.
Yeah.
Ain't no other way. This is
you got to go through this.
And so there's no way. That was necessary suffering, right?
Mm-hmm.
Takes his necessary suffering. And then the ascension afterwards, the resurrection afterwards. The resurrection ain't nothing without the cross, right?
Amen. Nope.
The cross, the death on display for everyone to see.
Yeah.
The whole thing is like showing to us. It's like Richard Rohr calls Jesus the archetype for humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's resetting things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so brilliant. Whether you believe it or not, dude, just read it for what it is.
It's an amazing thing.
It's teaching and telling us something about what suffering is, why suffering, and what can happen after suffering, right?
Whoa.
That coming back.